it for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
Play it on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K, 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 S-I-C-K,
All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
Play it on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
Giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K, 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 S-I-C-K.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. With Tony Marinaro.
55 seconds left in the penalty, a minute and 27 seconds left in regulation time. Boston 4, Montreal 3. Lafleur coming out rather gingerly on the right side. He gives it into Lemaire, back to Lafleur. Oh!
The sickest Montreal Canadiens podcast.
You're in the fall!
Sports entertainment like no other.
Rejoint, on lui fait perdre la rondelle, une passe devant. Et c'est le dégagement et ce sera la victoire des Canadiens. Stanley pour les Canadiens, le 23e de l'histoire.
You found the dogs! John, you found the dogs! He found the dogs! And all together, they worked a young team to the top. And now, a 24th Stanley Cup banner will hang from the rafters of the famous Forum in Montreal. The Canadiens win the Stanley Cup!
Brought to you by Energy Transportation Group. Driven to be different. La Vida TB. Embrace your true nature. And Playground, your premier gaming destination. It's gonna be sick.
Marinaro, the Sick Podcast. Let me see if I still know how to do this live from Portugal. Yes, I'm still here, and I'll be here for, I'll be back next week in Montreal. But yeah, I'm doing this, and it's a lot of fun with Shane Gaumont back at Master Control, and the Sick Podcast, of course, brought to you in part by Energy Transportation Group, a leading full-service logistics provider serving all of North America, driven to be different. You know that they were recently named by Deloitte and CIBC as one of Canada's best managed companies, the country's leading business award recognizing innovative and world-class companies. The best managed Canadian companies designation fuels Energy's purpose of creating progress for their customers, their employees, their communities. Join a winning team and check out Energy's career page for available opportunities. Also brought to you in part by the brand new, renovated, revamped Playground. Over 30,000 square feet of new gaming, dining, and entertainment space. Time to reacquaint yourself with Playground. World-class sushi. I like that. AAA steaks. I like that even better. Live shows, a brand new poker floor, and so much more located just over the Mercier Bridge. Only minutes from downtown Montreal. Playground experience. The Strip without the trip. I like that. Brewed in Quebec, a winner of a dozen international awards. Another partner of the Sick Podcast is La Bite à TB. They offer quality microbrewery beers made with premium ingredients for everyone's taste. La Bite à TB. Embrace your true nature. And, of course, also brought to you in part by Accent Insurance Solutions. You know, all insurance isn't created equal. I've been trying to tell you that. And you know where to find the right solution for you. It's Accent Insurance. Accent doesn't sell insurance. They shop insurance for you to find the right product, right on the money. Whatever your insurance needs, home, automobile, or business, call the Accent team today at 514-363-3636. You're not going to get the number wrong. Just think of Sergio Momesso, 363-3636, and get the right solution at the right price. Visit their website at accentassurance.com. Accentassurance.com. Without further ado, I don't remember when was the last time he and I did this together. He is a regular collaborator on the Sick Podcast every Monday. But I think for whatever reasons, here, there, and everywhere, and a little bit of travel for both of us, that I think we took a couple of weeks off. But we're back. We're back. And back in time for the new year on this Monday, January 8th. Happy New Year. All the best to you and yours. Eric Engels of sportsnet.ca. How you doing, bud?
I'm good. It's only been a couple weeks, but it feels like longer because I know you miss me. I know.
All right. I thought like today would be like 3 weeks, so it's only been 2. You know, when you travel and you know this. Yeah, thank you. When you travel and you know this more than I do, because you travel more than I do, sometimes you kind of lose track of time, dates, this, that, and all that stuff. So anyway,
yeah, when you cover a hockey team for a living, for a living, sometimes you kind of lose track of what day it is, what time it is also.
I hear you, man. Do we have a lot to talk about, though, eh? Because it's been a couple of weeks. I mean, they went on that 7-game road trip that was divided up in 2 segments, of course, before the holidays and right after the holidays. They went 500. They come back for their first game back, the dreaded first game back from the road trip. By the way, everyone talks about the dreaded first game back from the road trip. Do you have any stats on that? I know you're putting you on the spot, but everyone says the first game back is usually a loss. I don't even know if that's true. It's just everybody says that.
Honestly, I'm not the type of guy that looks up stats on that because to me, it's all bullshit. There is a reality factor that your first game back from a long road trip, especially if it's out west or whatever long road trip, whether even if it's in the Northeast and you play in the Northeast, like
Yeah.
If you have a team filled with players who have kids, they come back and there's a whole lot to do around the house and take care of things that you haven't been taking care of, that your spouse or significant other has been taking care of while you've been away. And all of a sudden you feel the need to, at least back cleanup and relieve a little bit. That's a factor. For younger guys who haven't been in the league long, it could be a factor that it requires time for them to adjust on how to properly make that change from West Coast time over to East Coast time, or sleep patterns, or take care of yourself properly so that you know how to. But, I'm sure I don't know what the statistics say. I don't know if teams more frequently lose those games than they do win them, but I know that the frequency of which we start hearing that excuse come out when a team does lose is definitely more significant than, when they win. Nobody really talks about, oh man, they had a long trip. It's really impressive that they got a win in this first game back. And I don't think the Canadiens started that game badly. They definitely didn't finish it.
No, they didn't finish it well. There's also, of course, a sense of fatigue, because when you've been away from your significant other for a couple of weeks, it's an opportunity for you guys to reacquaint yourselves. Right. So, some get more fatigued than others, and some don't really get all that fatigue. But anyway, it's another story. This is a family show. We should keep it that way. My bad. Me and my one I'm always going head in the gutter. Okay. So that game versus the Rangers on Saturday night, man, what an awesome game. Like, what an awesome game. This is all I've ever asked for over the last couple of years of finishing dead last a couple of years ago and fifth last year. And all I asked for was just entertain me. I know it's a rebuild. I know you're going to miss the playoffs. You might miss it this year. You might even miss it next year. Just entertain me. It doesn't happen all the time, and it's not always their fault. 82 game schedule, 3 games in 4 nights, 4 games in 6. Sometimes it's almost just physically impossible. Well, the Canadiens didn't give their fans much on Thursday night versus the Sabres. But, man, they gave them a game on Saturday night versus the Rangers. One of the better teams in the National Hockey League. And I get it. Samuel Montembeault stole it. But the Canadiens still did provide some run support. They give them 3 goals. What a great hockey game.
Great hockey game, and also due to the Rangers, right? Like, so much skill on that team. And you look at the defense and the way it's assembled, it's a pretty good model for what you might see from the Canadiens in a few years down the line. Like, I think that defense – I could talk a lot about that defense, but I won't bore anybody. But one guy I look at, I get excited. Everyone likes Jacob Trouba. Everybody likes Adam Fox. One brings physicality, the other offense. I love watching DeAndre Miller. Oh my God, this guy can skate like the wind. To have Braden Schneider on your third pair, Jeff Gordon had a big hand with Nick Bobrov in building the defense the New York Rangers have. Or also with their pro scouting when you think about what happened with Adam Fox. But, like, man, Ryan Lindgren, like, Charlie, his brother, was here for a long time in Montreal. Yeah. And just Ryan Lindgren, to me, is a player that I like to watch and just say, like, I see a lot of similarities in the game that Caden Gooley is building. Yeah. In terms of, like, those are 2 players that I think look alike. In terms of the way they play the game, he might be one of the most underrated players in the game, Ryan Lindgren. He's physical. He won't put up a lot of points, but he does contribute to offense getting started from his own end. He skates so well, and he's just tough as nails. So, yeah, like, I love watching their defense. Their forwards, talk about Ryan Lindgren being underrated. Like, Mika Zibanejad, I think, is the most underrated player in the NHL. Like, he's ridiculous, and obviously at the center of the storyline on Saturday night because of what the goaltender did to him on the other end. And I will say this, Tony, like, super entertaining game. People always ask us, you really don't cheer for the team, and I don't cheer for teams. I don't cheer for wins. I don't care about losses. I cheer for the best story possible, and man, did we get one on Saturday. Like, that was, as a reporter, the most fun type of game to write about.
That was quite the trade that the Rangers made when they went out and got Mika Zibanejad. That was quite the trade. It was Jeff Gordon, was it not? Or?
Hey, Ottawa came within a game of the Stanley Cup final, getting Derek Brassard in that deal. But yeah, I think that is the most lopsided trade and the most head scratcher type of trade. I would, if I could corner Jeff Gordon, I still don't think he would answer. But if I could corner him on how he pulled that one off, it's the heist of the century. Like,
well, basically,
especially where Zibanejad was at. Like, it was right before he was ready to pop, and like, I don't know, like if Ottawa had kept that player.
Yeah.
Anyways,
the way he pulled it off is basically that Ottawa threw in the towel on a young player. I mean, they just gave up on a very young player. They probably thought he was never going to be able to play the potential that they saw in him when they made him a top 10
that
pick.
simple. Like they identified a target, obviously, that they felt could help them through a playoff run, and he did. You know, Derek Brassard had a great run with Guy Boucher and those miracle kind of Senators and everything. But like, holy crap! Like watching Mika Zibanejad play, he is so lethal and so smart and so good at both ends of the ice. Like it's it was pretty amazing watching Sam Montembeault shut the door on him. That's for sure.
I was going to almost end with this, but we're there. So why don't we just start with it? The Canadiens have a 3-0 lead. The Rangers tie it up midway through the third at 3. Rest of the way, there's no goal in overtime. It goes to a shootout. Cole Caulfield scores the only one in a shootout. Mika Zibanejad does the Peter Forsberg one hand on the stick move to beat Montembeault, and it looks like he does. And Montembeault, in turn, sticks out his stick himself, has it along the ice, and is able to swat the puck away, stop it and swat it away. What a fantastic save. And here's the deal, and I've said this earlier today on BPM Sports, where I have a daily hit at around 12:40 p.m. Eastern with George Larac and Stefan Gonzalez. Today I said to George, George, when the Canadiens picked up Montembeault off of waivers, and I've said this story before, the first couple of times I saw him, and I'm no goalie expert by any means, obviously not, I said, I don't think this guy's an NHL goalie. And he not only proved he was an NHL goalie, last year he proved how much character he had by having a better season than Jake Allen. But despite all of that, Marty St. Louis didn't want to say last year he was the number one. He was asked about it on Saturday night after the game. Is Montembeault your number one? And he still didn't say he was. He preferred to answer it like he's playing like one right now. Your thoughts on all of that? Because I had doubts on Montembeault. I think the doubts are over. Like, I'm going to stop doubting the guy. He's a number one. I'm wondering where his ceiling is going to go, Eric.
Well, I mean, I think we're all wondering that. And I think as you and I discussed it earlier on this season, we're talking about a player that we all thought had the potential to be a really good 1B on a really good team, and showed that he was angling towards becoming a 1A. And the desire was to see whether or not he could become that and potentially more, right? As he was coming into a contract year and all that. If you're reading into St. Louis' comments as him doubting Montembeault, I don't think he has any doubt in Sam Montembeault. I will say this, like I remember going back to training camp. Somebody asked him if it was time for Raphael Harvey-Pinard to feel as though like he's earned his chair in Montreal. And his response was like, why do I ever have to say that? Like you have to earn it every single day. And I think you have to consider like where St. Louis has come from in his background as a player, right? A player that was undrafted, a player that went unsigned, a player that was cut from Calgary, a player that nobody, was begging to get into training camps and other places and nobody would give him his chair. And like he earned everything he got and continued to have to prove it. As soon as he was in the NHL, he was a fourth line player. He went down to the AHL. So his willingness to keep players hungry, or his desire to keep players hungry, I think that's part of good coaching. I think that's tactical. It's become undeniable for Marty or anybody else that doubted Sam Montembeault in the past that he's the number one goaltender on this team.
It's not even close.
That part is undeniable.
It's not even close.
Marty has to be careful about how he answers to those questions too, because he also knows he has to play Jake Allen and he has to play Caden Primo. Until that solution is found on the market and clearing up that space and moving into the future of what the Canadiens goaltending should look like and will, you still have to keep those guys somewhat fresh and still keep the market engaged. So it's a delicate balance. I would bet a lot of money that over the first 39 games of the year, I'm sure Marty would have liked to have played Sam maybe even a little bit more than he already has, but there are other factors at play here. So
that's a great
I don't
point.
think it takes anything away from him.
That's a great point. It's probably less about not wanting Sam to be complacent and more about not telling the entire world that Montembeault is your number one, because then you're clearly saying that Allen's not. At the same time, I mean, the scouts are like, everybody's watching. I think it's become pretty clear, but I think that's a great point. I think it's a real great point. All right. So blowing leads. Marty says we have to be more aware of blowing leads. I mean, actually, some of the players were echoing that as well. They almost blew it in Dallas, where the Stars came within a whisker of tying that game up, and Marchment misses pretty much an empty net in front of them. They almost blew it versus the New York Rangers, but I get, for me, I don't think it's really anything with their game. I think they're an average team. They're 39 points in 39 games. They're 500. The fact that they're able to be 500 with all the injuries they've had, and they have, I think, is the most surprising thing and pretty remarkable. These are growing pains of a team that is average to begin with and has a lot of key injuries. They're going to win some. They're going to lose some. They're going to surprise you in some. They're going to blow some leads in some. The goalie's going to steal some. This is who they are, Eric.
Yeah, and against Dallas Stars team that has the most comeback wins in the league, and against a New York Rangers team that's the best team on the road in the league. But yeah, you said it. No Doc, no Newhook, no Dvorak all of a sudden, and people will laugh and say, well, they're better off without Dvorak because it's so unremarkable necessarily what Dvorak brings to the equation. But when you lose a centerman who's over 55% in the draw, and you're left with one lefty centerman and a guy who can take minutes and free up space for Nick Suzuki on the ice in terms of freeing up the matchup a little bit, and a guy that plays on both special teams, you and I and the fans can say, well, maybe they're better off with it. And they're not. They're not better off with that guy gone, with Newhook and Doc already out as center options. The fact that they keep winning, the fact that they won on Saturday, this is what you look at it on paper. I don't think they should be able to do that. Now, the biggest factor in them being, sorry, go ahead, Tony.
No, go ahead. I interrupted.
The biggest factor in them winning on Saturday was obviously Montembeault, but they still scored the 3 goals to put themselves in a position to do it, right? And I think if people are watching objectively, third period, after it is 3-3, watch the way the Canadiens played the rest of that game. They played very well, very smart. They didn't give up a whole lot of anything except for the last few seconds of overtime. And you talked about the save that Montembeault made in the shootout with 1.5 seconds left. And this is why I think Zibanejad is such a special player. I don't know how many players in the world would have been like, this goalie's kind of hot and I'm going to really try and fool him with something here. And he purposely shoots a changeup at Montembeault with, 1.5 seconds left. It would be the last thing. And I asked Sam about it, and he said, well, I was a catcher also in baseball, so I kind of knew how to play the changeup. But right after that, if it gives you a sample of how good Sam's game was that night, is that he faces that changeup, and then he faces the ultimate fastball from Trouba. He winds up and steps into a puck that's coming towards him and rips it off his collarbone. He was so good in that game. But honestly, the Canadiens deserve their credit too. They played pretty well, and they're managing to do that in spite of all the injuries that you just mentioned.
Well, look, what I was going to say was I wanted to add on Dvorak. I understand people not being the president of the Dvorak fan club because, the Montreal Canadiens and Marc Bergevin made Phil Deneau walk, and he went to Los Angeles. And, Jesperi Kotkaniemi ended up in Carolina, and they figured, hey, you know what? We need a centerman. And they end up pulling the trigger on a deal for Christian Dvorak. We had heard that other teams were interested as well, the Bruins being one of them. And Dvorak really hasn't panned out to the expectations that some people had hoped for when they made the deal. But I mean, saying that they're better off with Dvorak, I mean, that's simply not true for many reasons. Number one, he takes time on the penalty kill. Number two, on any given night, he could be, like you said, their best face-off man. Number three, he opens up room for Suzuki to get away from possible matchups and maybe even Monahan. Number four, with all due respect to Mitchell Stevens, who had a really nice assist on Yoel Armia's goal on Saturday, he's an upgrade on him. So, I mean, look, the trade hasn't worked out. And number five, and we can add this, Dvorak's contract is up at the end of next year. I don't know if I can speak for you, Eric, but I think it's pretty obvious to me that this is going to be a player that they're going to try and move next year before the deadline. And so when you want to try and move players, you need them to play. I mean, they're not gaining market value when they're not playing. You need them to play.
Yeah, and I don't know how much he's adding to his market value or detracting from it from here to the end of this season, but for sure next season that comes into view. And you would think that if he's healthy enough to play right now, he at least gets the opportunity to build up his game so that he comes in next season with a certain confidence level that, hey, like, let's not forget, he started the season on IR. He had off-season knee surgery, and there have been parts of this season where he's actually played quite well. Like, it's not reflected in any kind of major statistics. And again, one of the biggest things that's gone against Dvorak since he's been in Montreal is he doesn't do anything that brings you out of your seat. When you don't have the stats and you don't have that going, it's very easy for everybody to pick apart your game and say, this is useless. It's not really there. But it's anything but useless to the guys in that room who all respect him and think he's a pretty consistent veteran type of presence for a guy who's still somewhat young at 26, 27 years old. But still, look, the Canadiens, it is impressive that they are where they are. I think it's a testament to their goaltending. It's a testament to the coaches as well to see that whether they get the results or not, they are progressing in the style and the culture and the things that they need to progress in to continue to get better. And some of the individuals now are starting to show that they've taken other steps in their development. The most obvious one is the kid who was drafted first overall in 2022.
So, Slafkovsky, speaking of which, and I got this off your Twitter feed earlier today, here's a little video, if we can bring it up. Doing a little bit of extra work. You're right.
In the bottom of the frame. Sorry about that.
Yeah, that's okay. I tried to crop it out as much as I could, but there was still a little bit. You got a big thumb, my friend. You know what they say? Big thumb, big hands.
I mean, I knew that's what you were going to say after making that comment, but sure.
Hey, working with a shooting coach?
Yes. Yeah, working with a shooting coach, Dr. Shot, they call him. Dr. Shot. So here's the thing about that, and I just wrote about this in my column for Sportsnet. I have a notebook that's out today, which is great going into Gallagher's scoring slump. The fact that the first time we actually talked about it was, after his 24th game, and there's a great contrast there with Anderson, and there's a part about Michael Pezzetta, who I think you and I should talk about at some point here. So I'll leave that for now. And
let me guess. Marty St. Louis often talks about some players playing chess and some players playing checkers. Michael Pezzetta is playing pinball.
Yeah, that
was
how
much
tweet.
I follow you.
Yeah, that was a tweet I put out on Saturday, and I had a good laugh with Pezzetta about it. I think he likes it. Would even take it as a nickname, but.
Even here in Portugal, Eric, I'm all over your Twitter.
I love it. But you know what? Like, I'm bringing this up. Slafkovsky was the third note, and based on that video, of course. And he was in there because what makes a first overall pick different than some of the other picks, or one of the high draft picks different from other picks? One of the things is their ability to progress quickly. And if I asked you right now, what was the biggest thing from the day he was drafted through his first season in the NHL that Juraj Slafkovsky really needed to work on? What would you have said? Would you say it was his play with the puck, or it was his play without the puck?
I would say Well, it all depends on which eye you want to look at it, but I'll answer it this way, okay?
Answer it. No, just one or the other. Just one or the other. Play with the puck or play without the puck.
I would think the thing he probably had to work on first, you would have thought would have been his play with the puck, because it seemed like he wasn't making all the right decisions.
Okay,
he was.
You got the wrong answer.
He was I figured I did, by the way. But
well, when you hear Marty St. Louis speaking for a year about the fact that they want to work on his reads and get him his touches and make sure he's in the right places to get the right touches, then it's clearly his play without the puck, right? You got to read properly, you got to find your positioning, you got to find your timing, and then you get the puck. And then, so one of the things that has been so obvious in Slafkovsky's progression is that all those things that I was just talking about, it's gone from his biggest weakness to probably his biggest strength that he's exhibiting on the ice, which shows how fast. That's the difference between players that are drafted first, second, third, fourth, fifth. They progress quickly in areas where they're focusing. And that's been all the focus for Slafkovsky in his time in Montreal. And that's why every time he's gone through an extensive point drought or whatever it is, you've heard Marty St. Louis say, I don't care about that right now. All I care about is him getting his touches, because if he gets his touches, it means he's going to the right areas of the ice to get them, and he's getting there at the right time. Right?
So the part of Slafkovsky's development that has really blown me away more than anything else has been his overall 200-foot game. And when you talk about a 200-foot game, you usually talk about a 200-foot game for centermen, not for wingers. But every now and then you talk about it for wingers, and Yuri Lettinen comes to mind, and Bob Gainey comes to mind, and there are others. I never thought that Slafkovsky could end up being this good of a two-way player. The way he's going, he could end up being like a really, really fine two-way player. The way he tracks back, the way he's able to strip pucks, the way he's able to recover pucks, the way he's able to take people out of the play. I think it's mind-boggling. And with that comes, you talked about their ability to do things, learn things right away. I thought it was going to take Slafkovsky a while to learn because of how big he is and how much he relied on his physicality and his athleticism. And as we know, players who rely on their physicality and athleticism throughout the years and throughout the ranks, they tend to exercise the brain less than other players would, because they're able to get away with doing certain things because of their physicality and athleticism. Well, for a guy who hasn't exercised the brain as much as a smaller player would, Uri has learned so quickly how to improve his overall game and make some of these adjustments. Obviously, the development team deserves a lot of credit. So there's some great teachers there.
They do, but it doesn't happen without the player, right? And special players find ways to do that. And you don't get chosen first overall without having a certain element of being special within you. And I was driving at a point here, right? Because I think you've noticed that despite all the improvement that Slafkovsky has made, and you talk about 200-foot game, back checking, forechecking, and all that comes with making the right reads. He has the body to do those things and has the ability to do them. But if he's not in the right place to do them, he won't do them. And I'm not comparing the two. It makes me think of like what the potential is. I think of like a guy like Rick Nash. I think of a guy who was known as an exceptional two-way player at that size. And here's the thing that should be really compelling. And that's why I put this video out on Twitter. Because 30 minutes after practice, yes, it speaks to Slafkovsky's work ethic, that he's out there with a shooting coach working on something that he clearly needs to work on. But I put it out because Slafkovsky has reached the point of his development where it makes sense for him to be working on that. Because we've seen in games of late that he is in position to shoot the puck, and he either hesitates or he's not ready, or when he is ready and willing, he misfires or gets a shot blocked. And so he was working on the different nuances of shooting with this shooting coach. And he has found, Marty has said several times, I used to laugh, and I usually laugh at players who work on their one-timer all at practice when they're not players who get into positions to take one-timers in games. that's where we're at with Slafkovsky. And I will wrap it up with the same thought that I had in my column today. Knowing how fast Slafkovsky has adjusted and turned a specific weakness, playing without the puck, into a strength, and it is a undeniable strength. Watching him forecheck, watching him backcheck, watching him play that 200-foot game that you talked about, which St. Louis said after Saturday's game, I've come to expect that out of Slafkovsky's game now. It doesn't surprise me when he strips a guy of the puck or wins a battle or does this or that. Knowing how fast he made that adjustment and turned a weakness into a strength, now he's working on something that he already has a skill for, and don't be surprised if the adjustment comes fast. It took him 39 games last year and probably about 15 this year to get to the type of game that we've seen over a 20 or so game segment where that other stuff is there. Now he's allowed himself to work on something where he'd actually be in position to take advantage of it. And I don't think the adjustment will take and when I say not a very long time, if it takes him 30 games where he gets a one-timer chance and finally scores on it, that'll start happening a lot more frequently as he does this work that he's doing now.
Another one of our regular collaborators, of course, Grant McCagg of Recruits and Recruits.ca, as well as the Recruits Draftcast podcast on the Sick Media Network, put out a couple of videos on Twitter where you see some great defensive plays by Juraj Slafkovsky, notably on Lafreniere. And one of the things Slafkovsky has been criticized for by members of the media and some members of the fan base, of course, is that in the last year, he often had one hand on the stick and, they would get that stick swatted away from him or he would end up losing the puck. But this year, every now and then, he still has a hand on it, but he just whips out that stick. And so he extends it and he's able to knock pucks off of other players' sticks and did a really good job of that on Saturday night. So listen, I'm really impressed. I've said this before and I'll say it again. At one point, I was starting to worry. Even though he was young, not worrying in the sense of did they take the right decision by keeping him here? And is he going to learn more here? And of course, they tried to defend it and they said, and I don't remember what was the exact example with the highway that Kent Hughes gave when there's a bunch of cars coming in at the highway, or you're better off staying on the highway or going on the service road or whatever it was. But I think it's safe to say, the Canadiens, they were right.
It was an answer to my question. My question is why have him go through that process in the world on the Autobahn of the NHL? That was how I framed the question. Why have him go through that process on the Autobahn of the NHL versus on the DeCarry Expressway of the AHL? And the answer, which made a lot of sense to me, is if you are not playing at that speed and learning at that speed, how are you ever going to play at that speed, right? When you and I spoke earlier this year, when it was an actual debate, Slafkovsky had gone 10 games without recording a point. He was playing decently well, but you could see he was getting really frustrated. Yeah. And the call for he should go to the AHL and this and that. And I said, look, if the idea this was the road trip to Arizona, I said, look, if the objective is to get Slafkovsky confidence, then it makes sense. If the objective is to have him achieve the number one thing that the Canadiens want him to achieve, which is processing the game at this speed, making the right reads, putting himself in positions to get touches, then he should stay here in Montreal. And you and I just spent 10 minutes talking about the speed at which he has adjusted and done things, because when you really think about it, 39, 55 games into an NHL career, 55 games into an NHL career to turn a glaring weakness into a strength, that is not a lot of time. That is super fast. And most players who come into the NHL, whether they're drafted first or drafted 700th, the number one thing they need to work on is their play away from the puck, is making those reads to put themselves in position to get the puck, is making those reads to arrive on the forecheck at the right time and the back check at the right time, and is learning. You talk about the one hand on the stick thing, learning how to engage throughout an entire shift, not waste energy, but exert it in areas where you didn't used to have to before because you didn't think you had to do that. Like the NHL moves so fast. If you are not, when we talk about those sequences of Slafkovsky kind of skating with one hand on his stick, he's a little less engaged in those areas, moving to get to a back check on time. It's not because he's lazy. It's just it took time to make those adjustments. It took him less time than it does other players, and that's a big factor in why he was drafted first overall. And when you go back and watch the videos of Bobrov talking about, or you go back and I remember the post-draft interviews with Bobrov and Lapointe and with Kent Hughes, that the discussion about how he adapted and being away from home at 14 years old by himself, and how quickly he adapted to the pro game, and how quickly he adapted going to the Worlds and going from the fourth line to the first line in the Olympics, the same story. It's not that surprising that it would take him less time to do these things.
You talked about Gallagher's first goal in 24 games, and I got to tell you, when he's in close like that, that's not the first time I've seen him go top corner like that. He's got a pretty good shot. Monahan scores his first goal in 10. Couple of weeks back, maybe give or take a couple of weeks, maybe it was probably about a month ago, there was a report, I think it was Dave Pagnotta, the fourth period, who said, hey, by the way, the Canadiens seem interested and are talking with Sean Monahan about a possible extension. And I came on and I said, this surprises me, because it's not a management team that usually changes their mind a year or two down the line. They have a plan and they see it through. When they acquired Monahan, the plan was to trade him at the deadline when he was injured, and then they talked to him again in the offseason and they brought him back. I think the plan was, once again, to get him back in the lineup. He puts up points, he shows his value, and they can have a second crack at trading him at the deadline. And now a couple of weeks ago, I believe it was Pierre LeBrun who came out with a report saying a couple of teams interested in Sean Monahan. I'm not surprised to hear that. Eric, if I was a betting man, and I know they've had a lot of injuries, and I know you can always use center iceman, and I know that Monahan's not old at 29. If I'm a betting man, I'm still betting that their plan is to trade Sean Monahan before the deadline. Yeah, obviously.
Look, I don't like to refute or confirm anybody else's work when I don't have the information myself. Nobody has come to me and told me that the Canadiens have had active negotiations with Sean Monahan over a contract. I will say that on a logical standpoint, and I've always said this about any trade, any contemplated trade of a player, you must know the value of a player to your team and weigh that against the value of your player on the market. And if the value on the market is greater than the value to your team, you trade.
Have to trade it. Correct.
So the Canadiens would have to be pretty silly if they didn't at least have some sort of conversation with Monahan and his agent to find out, what does a extension look like? What would Sean be looking for? What do they think it is? Are they aligned on that? They need to know what the value is of the player, not just in terms of his play to the team, but his value to the team based on whatever the number will be as a pending unrestricted free agent. Now, I could say this with a pretty fair degree of confidence because you asked me what you should be betting on. The Canadiens have a player in Sean Monahan who is how old? 29?
29.
He's 29. He has a $2 million cap hit. He has 700 games of NHL experience. He plays in all situations. He has a face-off percentage of over 56 or 57. He can play the wing. He can kill penalties. He can play up and down your lineup. He has been a top six forward and a middle six forward throughout his entire career since the day he stepped into the league. And he has played valuable, important games in this league. What do you think his value is going to be on the market? You think there will be a couple teams that'll be interested in a player like that? And knowing that, I would suggest very strongly, whatever his value is, whether it's a really great prospect or another first round pick, which I think the Canadiens will be able to obtain in moving Sean Monahan, I'm going to suggest that's going to be greater than the value he would provide the Canadiens
1,000%.
on a 3-year, contract extension, which is still, I think Sean Monahan has earned term. Whether or not the Canadiens would be wise to give it to him with Dvorak still under contract for another year, with Evans still under contract for another year, with Owen Beck coming, with a lot of other players in the system that are developing, and where they're at in their build, I would suggest that the value is probably higher on the market. And I will continue to suggest that as we move from here to the deadline.
I'm with you.
Because the market depends on how many interested parties there are too. And like, you have to think there's a lot more than one when you describe the player that I just described and what he can do.
Eric, if I'm a Stanley Cup contender and I'm taking a look at my team and I'm taking a look at the other teams, and I probably have 2 good centermen, I can always use a third. There's other teams I'm going to compete with. Teams that are going to go far, give a run at the cup are probably going to have 3 strong centermen. I'm looking at Monahan and I'm saying this could be the missing piece to the puzzle for my team, probably taking that extra step in the playoffs.
Yeah, like,
and now
dude, if I'm the Boston Bruins, I'm sitting there kind of kicking myself for not necessarily having the assets to get it done and figuring out how can I potentially do it. If I'm the Colorado Avalanche, I'm saying, okay, maybe I do have a couple of the pieces, like, I'm not saying that either of these teams have inquired or there's anything going on with either of them. I'm just saying, when you talk about a center who can play the wing and play up and down the lineup and kill penalties and play power play and play between 17 and 20 minutes a game and win 57% of his faceoffs and like is just a stand up. He has size. He's willing to play physical. Go down the list. Like, these are the players you dream of having at the deadline for under $2 million against the cap, with the Canadiens even potentially able to retain. I mean, the values is there. It was there a year ago before he got hurt, and it might, a year later, unfortunately, due to injuries, it might be just the same instead of being more than what it was a year ago, but it was there.
If I'm the Edmonton Oilers and I have Connor McDavid and I have Leon Draisaitl at 1-2, Monahan could be my third line centerman. At times, Monahan could be my second line centerman if I'm down a goal and I end up putting Draisaitl on a line with Connor McDavid. I understand.
I mean, they're lucky they have Nugent Hopkins. Yeah.
Yes, they have Ryan Nugent Hopkins, and I understand that. But there's so many examples of teams that we can give you that they could use a player like Sean Monahan. I mean, the Toronto Maple.
Maybe we should stop. This should stop being such a exhausting kind of discussion within the fan base.
Yeah,
who I totally understand why they would want to keep Monahan. If they can conjure up all the reasons why they would want to do that, they should be able to understand why it's going to be pretty hard for Kent Hughes to say no to a trade. Now, maybe I'm completely wrong, and maybe the Canadiens don't get offered fair value. But the thing I've learned about this business is the only time you really don't get offered fair value, if not more than fair value, is when there's only one team that's interested in your player. Like, knowing what we were just talking about, there's going to be a lot more than one team interested in this player. And the Canadiens, I don't know how they're going to be able to answer that question in a different way. Like,
I'm the Carolina Hurricanes. I'd like to have Sean Monahan on my team. And then I'll end it with this on Monahan, all right? The Canadiens have Nick Suzuki was their number 1 centerman. And you know what? Next year, Kirby Dach will come back and he'll be their number 2. And some nights he's going to play like a number 1. But right now, with Dach hurt, and you know what? They'll try Newhook again at center, and he'll end up playing a little bit of wing. Newhook's a possibility. But right now, with Dach hurt and with Newhook hurt, Monahan hasn't always been playing center, and Dvorak still got a year left on his contract. Evans still has a year left on his contract. Evans is playing center on a line with Monahan playing wing, and they end up taking turns. No, look, to answer your question, Monahan's value to other teams, as much as he's valuable to the Canadiens, is much more so than his value to the Montreal Canadiens. All right, a couple more things I want to talk to you about. One is Jaden Struble. I had a chance to see the interviews. Obviously, him and Jordan Harris, they're like bread and butter. I mean, they played together at Northeastern. They're playing again together. Jaden Struble, I was taking a look at the last 3 or 4 games. His minutes keep on increasing all the time. and I think it's 3 games in a row. I could be wrong, Eric. 3 or 4 games in a row where he's got the 3rd most ice time of Montreal Canadiens defenseman. 3rd most. It's usually after Matheson and Goulet. He's playing more minutes than Savard right now. He's playing more minutes than Kovacevic. He's playing more minutes than Harris. It's an incredible story. I mean, this guy's not.
It's a great story. Like, it's a great story because if you would have asked me before training camp this year, because he had a strong camp before he kind of got hurt. Like, what are the chances we'll see this kid in the NHL at some point this year? I would have said pretty negligible. He wouldn't have been the first name I would have thought of. I would have thought of William Trudeau. I would have thought of Logan Mailloux even. He had so much raw ability and physicality about him that the hope was that inevitably you could mold him into an NHL player and teach him how to play the game. It's kind of a wild horse that needed to be tamed. But all those questions are pretty much gone. Like, you don't overreact to a 17, 18 game sample. But we're way past, as Marty St. Louis said, he was surprised 5-6 games in. He's not so surprised now. Like, we're way past the surprise phase of this experiment.
Yeah.
And what we know for certain is that Jaden Struble is an NHL defenseman. We know that for sure. What we're learning and what he'll have to prove is that he consistently could go from being a guy who you'd say as a 5'6", just like Harris and Kovacevic and Barron and this and Jack-Eye, he's there. But can he be a top 4? And right now, he's making a very strong case that he will have to cement over the next little while. I believe he could.
Yeah.
I believe he could make the case. I believe he could cement it.
I believe out of all the Canadiens defensemen, he is the one who has most simplified his game and stuck with it.
Well, maybe that was always his game, just his ability to play it at the pro level after 4 years of college, and the last year in which he was pretty much languishing at Northeastern. Wasn't a great fit for him. I don't know what happened with their coaching staff or whatever. Like, it didn't look like he was becoming a better player there in his last year. He looks like a guy who was very much ready to become a pro and has really adapted fast and maybe just really been able to translate what's always been his game, and it just made more sense at the pro level. Some guys are like that. Some guys, you put them around better players and they're just better. Like, that's just who they are. Yeah. Some guys will be better players and go down to the AHL because they have one thing or this to work on, and they will really struggle versus what they would look like in the NHL game, where there's a lot more structure and it's a lot more predictable. I think the Canadiens are very happy that's not the case with Jack-Eye right now. He's playing very well down in Laval and working on the things that they want him to work on, and there's no rush to get him back in for a couple of reasons. One is Struble, and the other is Jordan Harris is playing pretty well too. Like, Jordan Harris has come back in the lineup, obviously recognizing that, okay, Jack-Eye's down, Struble's arrived, and I'm going to have to really fight to keep my spot here. And it's mixing up the cards pretty good for the Canadiens, and a good problem to have.
And Jack-Eye himself has actually elevated his game over the last couple of weeks himself too, because he sees what's going up upstairs. And he's like, you know what? I'm going to have to be at my best to be able to dislodge one of these guys, because these guys they're getting it done. And he's got quite the pairing, by the way. This is probably another story for another show. But him and Logan Mailloux are having some really, really good moments together, especially in the last 10 games or so. And, Jack-Eye's looking like an NHL defenseman down in the American Hockey League. But the guy who looks really good.
I said, before you go on, like, I said, like, I believed before Struble emerged and this and that if you look at those guys, Harris, Barron, Kovacevic, Jack-Eye, I really feel that Jack-Eye has the variety of elements within his game, offensively, physically, and if you could hone the defensive game, that he would be the most likely candidate that I believe would make it as a top 4 defenseman. And now I think Struble showing that he has those elements, and that like just that internal competition driving those two guys, and Xhekaj being able to play with Mayu, like you were saying, makes him better. Like this is such a good problem for the Canadiens to have. This is as good of a problem as you could hope for as you try to improve your development, right? Like this is it.
Yeah. All right. In ending, and this has been fun so far, but what's the one thing that you think we should be paying attention to over here over the next couple of days with the Canadiens being off for a couple, and then of course they're going to visit the Flyers in Philadelphia?
Well, I want to see, specific to that game against Philly, like I want to see how the Canadiens adapt to playing a different style of team, right? Like they're going from a couple of really deep, skilled teams, Dallas, Tampa Bay, to playing a real hard-nosed, very much in the image of the Philadelphia Flyers team. Like John Tortorella's Flyers, who will play like the Flyers are supposed to play and what their entire franchise is supposed to mean. Like they have a bunch of lunch pail dudes, and they play a physical brand of hockey, and it's what they've done this year has Tortorella in the driver's seat of the Jack Adams race. I would suggest. I think there's a couple of good candidates with him. Like I'm very surprised at where Washington is in the standings. So I guess it's Spencer Carberry in Washington. He would have a pretty good opportunity to be in that conversation. I think if Marty continues doing what he's doing, he'd be in that conversation too. They'll probably lower down the list unless the Canadiens miraculously made the
get
playoffs.
A wild card spot. Yeah, who's starting in goal on Wednesday in Philly?
Don't know yet. Not confirmed yet.
I know because I saw all three goalies involved in practice. Of course, at one point they were on.
They're playing back to back.
Yeah,
they're playing back to back, right? They're playing Philly, then they're playing. Is it San Jose in Montreal? So I think it's San Jose. Again, we talked about the days
Sharks,
all blending together.
Yeah, the Sharks, and then they got the Oilers on Saturday.
I wouldn't be surprised. We don't have any confirmation of anything yet. I would bet Montembeault plays against the Flyers and Primo plays against San Jose, and then we might see Allen on Saturday against who is it?
The Oilers.
The Oilers,
but they have two goalies now.
Yeah,
they say they're comfortable with their two goalies.
Who, the Oilers?
That's what they say. That's what.
We'll see how they feel if they go on a 4-game bender. I know they finally worked themselves into a playoff spot. The thing about starting as far behind as the Oilers did is the amount of effort that goes into getting back is unthinkable, and then you have to sustain it, right? So you don't, the minute you go on a little skid, you're right back in the same seat.
Copley's hurt, by the way. Copley's hurt for the rest of the season for the Los Angeles.
Yeah, L.A., New Jersey,
backing up
Carolina.
But they also have David Rittich as a backup.
There are plenty of teams in the NHL in need of a strong, stable goaltender. Toronto. There's a lot of teams. So I don't think we've seen the last of Jake Allen in Montreal. I think you could see all three goalies this week. I would be surprised if it wasn't Montembeault right away. Montembeault against the Flyers.
I think he deserves it. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, the way he played on Saturday and he won a big game. Marty St. Louis can probably smell a wild card spot 5 or 6 points away or whatever it is. I would think he's going to go back to Montembeault. But then again, if he doesn't, it's probably not his call.
Well, I think it's okay also to go back with Montembeault on Wednesday, if only for on top of the rest from Saturday to Wednesday. You're also going with the guy who's freshest from Saturday to Wednesday, like, because it is a long kind of lag between games versus the schedule that they've been in recently. So I think it makes a whole lot of sense to go to Montembeault outside of the reasoning that he earned it. I think if the Canadiens were playing Tuesday, we might see it. That's one of those situations where if Montembeault was the number one, it might make sense for him to rest, with a back-to-back. So
St. Louis versus Tortorella. Can't wait. Thanks, Eric Engels. I'll talk to you again 1 week from tonight, I guess.
I will say that when I was at the coaches GMs meeting at the beginning of the year, I was talking to Tortorella about St. Louis, and his eyes lit up. the minute I mentioned Marty St. Louis, his eyes just lit up.
Oh, really?
Like he absolutely has a world of respect for a guy that not only did he coach and have a great relationship with it, they went to war with each other, those two guys, and he loved that about him. He loved that Marty would battle with him about ice time or decisions or anything like that. Those are the guys that Torts respects the most, and he certainly thinks that Marty St. Louis is becoming a hell of a coach.
I remember one conversation I had with Tortorella. It was I pulled him aside and we started talking, and I said, "Hey, where does your family hail from? Where in Italy exactly?" And he told me, and it was Southern Italy, and I knew where they were from, and we had a real good conversation about that. And I'd asked him if he had been, and I think he had said he did not, whatever. And then the next time was right after a game, and Alex Kovalev did something, and I asked him a question about Kovalev. I think it's whatever. And he's like, "I don't give a shit about Kovalev." So anyway, I had such a real nice conversation with him. And the next day, I think it was, or the next time, I don't remember if it was the day after, whatever.
He's like, he's one guy. I know
Kovalev, yeah.
I know we got to go, but like, he's one guy that if you meet him and talk to him, he is a wonderful, wonderful guy. Does he have patience for a post-game availability when his team loses? Absolutely not. And that's what makes him one of the most entertaining guys in hockey. As a coach, I think he's fantastic. Is he always fantastic every day? And is every part of what he does fantastic? No. But man, you could say a lot of things about John Tortorella, whether you love or hate him or whether you think his methods are antiquated. That guy cares a ton about his players, even the ones who he's hard on, especially the ones he's hard on. So, and I'm sure Marty would attest to that too.
Check out Eric's article on sportsnet.ca and give him a follow on Twitter if you haven't already. Thank you so much, my friend. I'll talk to you soon.
See you, Tony.
All right, there you have it. Eric Engels, Marinaro. Once again, I want to thank Energy Transportation Group. I want to thank Playground. I want to thank Accent Insurance Solutions. And I want to thank La Bit ATB. I also want to thank all of you for watching my Sick Army, my Sick community. If you liked it, like it, share it with your friends. Comment Sick, 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 SICK. Leave us a 5-star review on Apple. It's our way of feeling the love. No Sammy and Yellow or Juliana today. As a matter of fact, no, it's Shane Gaumont. So for Shane Gaumont at Master Control, it's a Sick Podcast. I'm Marinaro. Have a good night. We'll be back tomorrow night, same time, same place, right here, 10 p.m. Eastern. Tell all your friends about it. The podcast really is sick, and so am I.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Tony Marinaro on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts. The Sick Podcast is brought to you by Energy Transportation Group, driven to be different. La Vida TV, embrace your true nature. And Playground, your premier gaming destination.